I got an email from a woman named Lynn who told me she saw one of my psychotic roommate story times and wanted to share her story about being a live-in nanny for a very wealthy family in Aspen, Colorado. The wife apparently was very popular or is very popular on social media, and the husband is just like quietly probably a billionaire. She says she doesn't know how much money they had, but it was a lot, and their behavior is nothing short of just outrageous. So I don't really know what to make of this, but I'm just going to tell you what she said in her email. So she has said she's not originally from this country, but she's very Americanized. She's been here for a long time. And it was always part of her plan that she was going to be a live-in nanny. She'd been doing it for a long time and was looking for a new host family. So one of her friends put her in contact with a woman that she knew through her employer, and she goes to interview with this woman. The house is nothing short of a mansion. It's tucked into the mountains with giant glass windows, and the house is pristine, beautiful. She said walking in, it felt like a movie set. There was no sign of life that anyone actually lived there. She meets the husband and the wife. They tell her they have 2 children. They tell her that they are pretty strict. They have a lot of rules in the household, and the husband is not really talking throughout this whole thing while the wife is talking. And she asks her about her experience as a nanny. She asks her very personal questions like, does she have a boyfriend? Does she keep a diary? How often does she talk to her family? The woman tells her if she takes the job that she will have 2 weeks paid vacation, but that she's not allowed to have any outside guests at the house ever. The woman tells her they travel a lot. She asks if she has a valid passport, and she says that she'll be expected to make all of the trips with the family as they deem appropriate. Lynn said the pay was pretty modest considering the scale of their wealth, but it seemed like a pretty good deal, so she accepts the job. She meets their kids. They're a boy and a girl. They're about 5 and 9, and the kids are quiet throughout the entire introductory process. They barely say anything besides hi. When she moves in, she's handed a list of rules and regulations for the children that she's expected to follow. The rules at first seemed pretty crunchy, Aspen mommy, as she described it. Things like no sugar, no toys with noise, no TV, no screen time. There's also a few things on the list that Lynn described as a little bit odd. One thing was no red foods, not red dye, no red foods, because the mom said that they stain. So no red meat, no red apples, no red onions. Also, no foods that had ever at any point been packaged in plastic. Also on the list is no storytelling and no conversations that have not already been approved by the mother. And ask the mother what she means by this, and the mother tells her, don't talk to them about anything that I haven't already approved. So I'll give you a list of all of the conversation topics that you're allowed to answer questions on. If it's not that, default to me. She also tells her the children both must be in bed by 7:12 p.m. and not a minute later. Lynn was disciplined a lot while living with this family. She said the first time it happened was a few weeks after she moved in. The 9-year-old girl didn't know how to tie her shoes, so Lynn was trying to show her when the mom walks in the room and she says, what are you doing? And she says, I'm trying to teach her how to tie her shoes. And the mother said, I gave you a list of what you were allowed to teach them and what you were allowed to talk to them about, and tying her shoes is not on it. I have a parenting plan. That's not part of it. Please stop. So Lynn stopped. She said the children were extremely well behaved and very, very quiet. Not like any kids that she had nannied before. But she gets called into the mother's office, and the mother basically rips into her and tells her, like, you need to take these rules and regulations that I gave you seriously. And Lynn apologizes, and she says she will. She said basically it wasn't her place to determine how to parent. They weren't her kids. So even though it felt a little bit more like training a dog than it did like raising a child, she decided that she was just going to take the mother's word for it. At this point in her email, Lynn also mentioned that there was a wing of the house that was padlocked and nobody was allowed back there. When Lynn asked the mother what was behind there, she just said it was storage, and even the children weren't allowed to go back there and not to worry about it. Sometimes the parents would have company and they would all bring them to the storage area of the house at night, but Lynn was in her room, and honestly it wasn't her business, so she didn't really mind. She said another strange thing the mother did was sometimes she would be in the children's bedrooms like at night reading them a bedtime story, and she would notice the mother would just be like standing outside their bedroom doors like watching. She was never smiling, she was just staring at them, and sometimes she would say, I'll take it from here, and she would put them to bed herself. She said playing with the children was strange also. Like, the children didn't play on their own. It was like they were always waiting for instruction on what to do. Lynn tried to encourage them to use their imagination, but they would just stare at her and say, what should we do next? One night, the older girl, the 9-year-old, wakes up in the middle of the night and she's screaming, and Lynn goes into her room to comfort her, and she tells her that there's a woman with a glass face standing in the garden. She brings this up to the mother the next day, and the mother just tells her, yeah, we know about the lady with the glass face, don't worry about it. The older daughter's nightmares or seeing the woman with the glass face continues. She keeps complaining about it, and Lynn is growing more and more concerned for her. She thinks she's got like some trauma or just something unresolved that causes her to wake up in the middle of the night. So she brings it up to the mother again, and the mother gets angry, and she says, I told you not to talk to me about it. We know about it. It's being dealt with. Lynn is disciplined again a few weeks later when one night she wakes up in the middle of the night. She's thirsty. She goes to the kitchen, and she was told when she was hired that basically she got a grocery allowance, but she notices there's like a glass jar of ginger juice in the fridge, and she takes a drink of it because she thinks it'll help settle her stomach. I guess she wasn't feeling well, I don't know. She hears noise coming from the padlocked wing of the house, so she walks over and she described the noise as chanting from a large group of people. She doesn't really know what to make of it, so she just goes back to bed. The next day, she's called into the mother's office again. The mother lectures her on waking up in the middle of the night. She says she's expected to sleep through the night. She also tells her the ginger juice was not part of her grocery allowance, and she will be docking the cost of the glass of juice that she had from her paycheck. Lynn said she wasn't expected to keep up with chores around the house. They had a different staff for that. But one day the mother tells her she needs help setting up the dining table. So Lynn begins to set the dining room for company, and the mother says no in this part of the house, and she brings her back, opens the padlock, and they go into this other wing of the house, and she said it was like a whole other house in there. There were bedrooms, there was bathrooms, there was a kitchen, and there was a huge dining room with a giant wooden table and a very strange human-like sculpture in the middle of the table. The mother says this is the table we'll be setting, and she shows her a cabinet full of fine china, and she has her set the table for 14 people. The mother tells her that night they're having company and she's expected to attend and sit with the children. So she gives her this new nice black dress. She says, "You're wearing this." And that night, 9 guests arrive and they all sit around the table. Lynn is sitting with the 2 children. The mother tells her beforehand, don't speak unless spoken to. And at one point in the dinner conversation, a man looks at her and then looks at the parents and says, "Why is there an outsider here?" Lynn ignores this comment. She continues tending the children, who don't speak a word throughout the entire dinner. After the dinner, the mother pats her on the back and says, "You did great." She instructs her to take the children to bed as it's 7:10 p.m. She gets them to bed. She goes back down to the kitchen because she's like nosy, and she hears from behind the padlocked door that same chant. She says she has absolutely no idea what they were doing, but if anyone has any insight, please let her know. She says she has a million more strange things that happened while she was nannying at this house, but ultimately she quit because she didn't like how the children were being treated. She ultimately felt more like a servant than a paid employee of the family.